Buonasera signore e signori e benvenuti, è davvero una gioia vedervi così numerosi in ormai alla vigilia dell'inizio dei nostri festeggiamenti per il bicentenario, ma come ripeto in ogni occasione il regalo che i nostri colleghi, dei direttori dei principali musei europei, e poi il 22 novembre avremo il direttore del Museo Egizio del Cairo, hanno fatto al Museo Egizio è incredibile. Adesso vi ho salutato tutti, passo all'inglese e c'è anche la possibilità di avere una traduzione. So, well, thank you so much for being here. I was saying how delighted and honored we are that colleagues responded so enthusiastically. The President and I wrote to 10 colleagues of major European institutions and our colleague from the museum in Cairo, because we said we have a dream. The year of the bicentennial, we would like to be in dialogue with colleagues to learn, to exchange ideas. And all of you said yes. So thank you so much for being here, because we have been learning so much from this dialogue to see where are the museum nowadays. And today, really, I don't say only because you are here, but we all think here, we are really, really lucky. To have the President Director of the Louvre means to have, I dare to say, the director of the most important museum in the world, not only in Europe. So thank you so much. A big applause to Laurence.
Thank you, Christian,
for being here. And so I start immediately asking you to connect also for what we are doing. I managed to bring Laurence to the working place, so she has seen that we are almost there.
It's almost done, don't worry.
And we are celebrating, of course, the bicentennial. For us, it's a very important milestone because, well, you know, our collections concerning the Egyptian part are also twins, because when the second Rovetti collection arrived, we are also very lucky because the first Rovetti collection was offered to France first, and thanks God they said no. So then we have at least, because now we can be
Bad
in dialogue.
decision, but fantastic for you.
And but as you know, we are so linked to France. Jean-François Champollion arrived here immediately on the 9th of June 1824, and now in celebrating 200 years, we decided to say, of course, we are a public museum. Things have changed a lot in 200 years, and we want to change to have an architectonic transformation of the museum, not only to do a building, but to transform the way we can connect to society. How is the Louvre working in this direction as well? Transforming is a wonderful building to connect even more with Paris, with the people living in Paris, and with tourists coming from all over the world.
Well, Christian, thank you so much for this extremely important question. I will try to answer in a few minutes. But let me first say how happy I am here tonight. I'm very lucky, you know, this is my little holiday in a very busy week, and I enjoy so much visiting the galleries, visiting the new galleries soon to be opened. And I just wanted to say a big congratulation now to you, Christian, to all your teams, because what you have done over the last years is an amazing and a very important job in terms of museography and in terms of bringing together the care for the audience, for the visitor, which is so important that we will go back to, and the research and the accuracy of the historical information. And I think it's at the heart of our missions, and it's not an easy job. It's never an easy job. You have to question all the time yourself, the teams, your practice, the way you work, the way you present, the way you tell stories also. And you have made really groundbreaking, I think, experiences here in Torino, and with lessons to be learned by really major museums around the world, including the Louvre.
Well,
so thank you for pushing the barriers and push us also to ask ourselves questions. The question you just asked me is, of course, a capital question. As you know, I'm relatively new in the job as president of the Louvre. It's been 3 years that I've been, sorry to be a little bit personal, but I will tell you maybe a little bit about my approach of this question. Previously, I was the president of the Musée d'Orsay, Musée de l'Orangerie, and previously also had been in charge of the Louvre Abu Dhabi project for 6 years, which is something that we might also address tonight. And I am a modernist. I am a specialist of Impressionism, Manet, Courbet. So I'm very far, from the Louvre collections, and maybe it's why the President of the Republic made me the honor to consider this extraordinary position 3 years ago, probably to start thinking again about how we're going to project the Louvre in the 21st century. And the recent history of the Louvre is one of a major decision made in the early 1980s by President Mitterrand, which is exactly what this image is about, the Grand Louvre, and of course the symbol of the Grand Louvre, the pyramid designed by Yeo Ming-pei. This is a 1980s vision of a museum, expanding museum, all the palace, the original Palace of the Louvre, given back to the Louvre. Extraordinary vision of a modern museum inspired by what American museum had done in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and Pei just had designed the new wing of the National Gallery in Washington when he was chosen for the pyramid. So there was a sort of American a little bit influence, which is something that the French people will never tell, but I can tell. And it was, as you know, an extraordinary success. But it's almost too much of a success, because when the Grand Louvre was imagined, it was before the fall of the Berlin Wall in the early 1980s, and before China was open and Chinese people were, not traveling around the world. The cultural tourism was not at the peak it is now. And when the pyramid was opened in 1989, the whole thing was already too small. This pyramid has been designed to welcome 4 million visitors at most a year. Nowadays, last year, we reached 9 million visitors, and I capped the number to 30,000 visitors a day. So it brings you immediately the question of the visitor. It's not a drama to have 9 million visitors, but it's a drama not to welcome them properly. And it's also about the stories the way we are going to show our collection, the way we show our collection, and what stories we are going to tell them about these extraordinary collections. And what you have to admit is that the Grand Louvre is a moment in history extremely important, but it was 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, the big question was the building, expanding the building, expanding the galleries to show more of a collection, which was absolutely necessary at that time for the Louvre, to have a modern, way of displaying the collection. And it was really a moment where the curators of the Louvre, the head of departments, really work at this expanding vision of a museum. But probably at that time, the question of the audience, the visitor's experience, as we say today, was not at the heart of a project. It was really a project about collection and building, basically. And when I arrived three years ago, I immediately felt that the big question was, of course, to somehow rethink the Louvre for our moment in history and for today's and for tomorrow's audience, because those large institutions, as wonderful as they are impermanent by nature. They, in fact, keep changing all the time. And I would say that almost each generation, or at least every 40, 50 years, you have sort of new vision, a new sensitivity also that comes and that will bring something to the way we display the collection and we address the question of a museum. And I think the big question of a museum world over the last 30 years is the question of the audience, of the visitors. How do you connect those extraordinary collections, but sometimes extremely complex ones, to today's audience with visitors that, and I'm speaking for the audience of the Louvre, especially the French people, that no longer have the cultural references that our parents, our grandparents were born with almost. It was quite obvious. We are at a moment in history where people are puzzled by religious iconography, that crucifixion or an annunciation is no longer something that people read immediately as a subject. So how can you understand Poussin, or how can you understand Leonardo if you don't understand the iconography, the subject, the object of a picture? So we are at a moment in history. I'm not saying that people know less things than before. That's not at all my point. They are, when you talk with young people, they know a number of things that, I'll never know. But they have other sources of information. And of course, when they go to a museum nowadays, they might be puzzled by the experience of a museum. That is not to say that it's no longer relevant, but it's time that we ask ourselves a few questions about the Louvre. So the project and the spirit I am working with the Louvre teams I've been working for the last 3 years, is really a sort of rethinking the universal vocation of the Louvre, because this is something that sounds very French, this universal approach, very much linked to our political history, to the revolution, and you know that the Louvre was transformed from a royal palace to a museum by the French Revolution, so it's a very political place in our history. So how do we, this DNA of the Louvre, how do we respect it? Because we believe that the values of access to culture for everyone and of equality of recognition of civilization and artistic expression coming from all over the world and from different moments in history is a very important thing. How do we address those questions? How do we share those values in today's world with the same relevance in terms of history, historical accuracy, of course, but with an attention to the spirit of the time also, and to the questions our visitors ask. The provenance of the collections, for instance, how sensitive those issues are and how we have a duty to answer them, including, the dark spots of our histories in collection. I'm absolutely open to this. And when I arrived at the Louvre 3 years ago, I said to the head of departments, different director of departments, we will address those questions, because if you try to hide them and not to answer them, it'd be more and more violent, and the institution will be more and more criticized by hiding, the dark stories or whatever. We don't know exactly what they are hiding, but they must be hiding something. We have to address that, and we have to bring the good out of a history, to recognize when something went wrong, but also we care and we believe deeply that this model of a museum is still relevant in today's world. And my job is to create a sort of intellectual framework, you know, for the Louvre, for this kind of question, and also to translate it physically, I would say, in terms of a master plan that we are discussing with our Minister of Culture right now, because obviously we need to modernize and to adapt to the reality of the very high number of visitors of the Louvre. So on the table, we have now the question of a second entrance for the Louvre to balance the pyramid entrance and be able to welcome people, you know, visitors in good conditions. I'm sorry, I've been too long.
No, it's been, you're giving us so many, I have so many, while you were talking, I was developing so many questions. I'm gonna start from the very end of what you said, because it's something that we have in common. I mean, we are very small, but what I tend to say is this building, well, the building that you have the honor to direct, it was a royal palace which had galleries of art. Our building was a boarding school for the family of Turin who came here. Then it became the Academy of Sciences, which I showed you is still here. And then in 1824, when the collection arrived, it was thought, well, this is the place where we can adjust the collection. But it was never thought to be a museum. So we are striking in our sometimes little rooms to adjust the work of arts of ancient Egypt. I mean, those statues which are very heavy and they need space to adjust the increasing number of visitors. And also, I was rereading a few days ago an interview with the Director General of UNESCO, Azulay, and she said, if we want to decolonize the museum, before we decolonize the museum, we should decolonize society, because it's very different. And then I was thinking, well, if I want to try to have a new narrative of ancient Egypt, I'm still in a Baroque building, which has its layer of history, of course which is very, but gives immediately overlayer. So are you also thinking of ways of how you can create neutral spaces inside a building, which is itself, as you said, historical building, very important, because we all say that probably the public museum is born. Well, the Grand Galerie du Louvre is open and it's not belonging to the king anymore, but it's belonging to the Republic.
Yeah.
So how do we have to deal? Because you said also we expand, we add pieces, but the main, I mean, and the Louvre has done incredible things in the past few years. Louvre, Abu Dhabi. I have the honor to teach at the New York University of Abu Dhabi, so I always bring my students there. Louvre Lens, so the Louvre is also going out to meet, and then you have the reserve now, which have moved out of the building. So the Louvre is expanding also physically, but how do you deal with this very stratigraphic historical build? I'm thinking, for instance, of the wonderful exposition of the Egyptian collection, which is in some of the nicest galleries, because also of the artistic value of the galleries where they're in. How do you put them in dialogue?
But, well, you have, you know, when you are leading an institution like the Louvre, you have to start with the history of a place and of a collection. I do believe, I mentioned DNA. I do believe that each museum is also, it's a special alchemy, you know, a chemistry between a building and the collection. And there's a different magic. There's a magic for the Louvre, there's a magic here, there's a magic in the British Museum or the Met, it's always different. And in the case of the Louvre, it's very true that it's a very beautiful place with some extraordinary decor. You just mentioned the Charles X galleries for the Egyptian department, but there are other extraordinary places in the Louvre. But it's also a stratigraphy. The building you know, is an extraordinary history of architecture itself and of museum architecture over the last more than 200 years now. And I think we should respect that. We should respect it. I do not think the tabula rasa is impossible in the Louvre, and it is a very bad idea. Anyway, the whole building is protected, as you know, historical monument. But it's also very important that the visitors, and it's not an easy thing to give access to the visitors, they should experience this stratigraphy of time, this palimpsest, as we say in French, you know, of different layers of history which are intertwined. And I think that you cannot fight against that. That would be stupid. You have to adapt. You have to take into account this question. And for instance, we just had an international competition to choose the architect and designers for a new department that I created, dedicated to Byzantium and art of Eastern Christianities, which will be really at the heart of the museum in connection with the Roman galleries, the apartments of Anne d'Autriche, beautiful, extraordinary decor, and connected to the Islamic art department designed by Rudy Ricciotti. So it's the two opposites, you know, of the Louvre. And so the architect had to find their place, you know, within this different stratigraphy. And we chosen unanimously the Y agency based in New York and Los Angeles. They are actually working right now on the Rockefeller wing for the Met, because it was not something that was imposing itself, but a project that works on the connections, you know, of these different layers, of these different departments, and touch, you know, the right point, as the leader of this architect, Jane say, it's like a acupuncture, you know, you touch the point and you have to be just right. And you do not have to destroy everything. You cannot destroy anything anyway in the Louvre. You have to find your place, and you can do something extremely beautiful, I think, and modern at the same time, which will reflect our sensitivity. Of course, next generation will do something else. By nature, the Louvre will never be completed. And that's extraordinary when you think about it. The building has been changing for 800 years, and because it is a living body, with, I hope, living collection, and hope living, you know, people working in it, it will always change. And that's really the beauty of it. And when you admit that you're just a point in history, joining two moments, then you start to relax. You say, okay, this is not only me, you know. This is what the building is about. It's about sharing beauty, history, curiosity, openness to the world, education. And so it's, by nature, it will adapt itself to the society of the time, to the taste of the time.
Yes, that's is also one of the things that I love the most about our job. Also the realizing that we are just a point in history, that whatever we do will be changed, probably criticized by new generations, like probably, we do from previous generation, and that's beautiful because more or less in this museum, for instance, the core collection remains the same, but still every generation will change the display. We have new things to say because we will have new questions to ask.
Of course.
And like research is asking you new question, we get new insight, and so the display is changing. That's what is amazing about our job, I think, and being in contact with the objects. I always also relax when I think there is a wonderful poem written by Pindarus, a Greek poet, who said that our life is shorter with the movement of the wings of a fly. And so, well, I remind myself all the time when I look at the objects and realize that whatever I do, good or bad, compared to the life of the objects, which are average 3,500 years, is nothing. And the objects will be there, and we will talk to next collections.
Of course.
You said something very interesting in saying how we have to find and develop new ways to be able to reach out to public, also in thinking that maybe they don't have the cultural background or they don't have the means to understand the work of art of the objects we put in front of them. Article 3.2 of the Italian Constitution say that the Republic has to take out all the obstacles that do not allow the personality of a person to develop in an harmonious way. And I always think, well, the museum are at the heart of that, as much as schools and universities, because we have to deliver a message to everybody comes. We have tried in this museum to do a lot, but, and here comes my question, we did a survey recently, and it turned out that of the adult population coming to the museum, the large majority has an MA title or higher. Since we know that people get an MA in Italy are like 30% of the population, I must say that we are still failed, or we haven't succeeded in reaching out. I asked the same question Miguel Falomir when he came, because I asked him whether having the 2 hours free of charge in the evening was helping for more universal engagement. And he said, well, if I'm honest, the most people that come are people that live in the neighborhood, and maybe they take advantage of that. But it's very difficult, as it were, there is like a threshold in front of the museum, which is not there, but some people feel as if, what are you implementing in the Louvre, and how do you think you can reach out for people? And maybe we also have to come to terms that some people do not want to come to the museum, which is fine as well.
The freedom of going to a museum is also the freedom of not going to a museum. I mean, we have to admit that also. But first of all, we share the same issue, and we can see it as a sort of collective failure, because this has been the obsession of a public policy in terms of culture in France, but also probably in Italy and many other countries. And we finally have the same kind of numbers. So it's sort of reproduction, you know, of a certain kind of audience, visitors that are the visitor type, you know, of our museum, and we do not seem to change those profiles. But I think it's part of our job to always try and to be in a collaboration, especially with of course, the education system. I reopened a lot the Louvre. I was amazed when I took my position to unfortunately see that the Louvre was not welcoming many schools. The Louvre was a little bit trapped in a touristic approach. You know that before COVID, the Louvre reached 10 million visitors a year, which, I mean, it's a gigantic number. And of course, when you are at the speed of international visitorship, there's a tendency to neglect, you know, the proximity visitors and some missions that I think are very, very important. So part of my approach to the Louvre was to cap the number of visitors every day, because this was a big step, and, you know, a decision that was a reduction of revenue for the museum. So it's not an easy decision to make, especially when you start at the Louvre. But I wanted to make it from the start to say, my mission is to give a sense of purpose to the visit to the Louvre, you know, again, including for international visitors, but also bring back Parisians to the Louvre, visitors, you know, living in Paris and all around Paris, because they do no longer, they don't come any longer anymore to the Louvre, because they think it's too crowded, it's a touristic attraction, and it's no longer a place of education, of enjoyment, or whatever. And we started with a school, and I made the decision to welcome the schools in a priority way on the closing day, on Tuesdays. Because I think that the first visit that young kids, and it's for all the ages of the school system in France, this first contact with the Louvre should be a magical moment. So the museum is closed, they have, they are all by themselves with their teachers, with people from the Louvre. They discover the collection in an extremely magical way, especially the Egyptian department, of course. But generally the kids adore, Egypt, as we all know. And that I think that it's a moment of foundation, It's a very important moment. And I think, and I join you with this sort of political vision of a museum. We are here to share, and we should work together with the education system in order to give to the youth of our countries, respective countries, the taste, the possibility to discover those collections, and for them to feel at home at the Louvre, not to feel this distant and palatial place, that is a little bit intimidating. I mean, the place is gigantic. It looks like a fortress in many respects. It's not an easy decision to go to the Louvre, and if a school and if a Louvre doesn't do the work together to reach out and bring the kids to the Louvre, they probably won't go with the families, because they are far socially, culturally. They might even be in a place where this kind of place could be rejected, So we need to work on this. But we also need to go out of a museum. That's very important. So we have a lot of actions all around Paris, but also in what we call the different provinces, of course, of France. And we have a wonderful experience with the Louvre Lens. The Louvre Lens is also a political decision. Lens is a town in the northern part of France where they used to have the mines, the coal mines of France that, of course, shut down. This is a territory, a part of France that suffered a lot socially, politically. And it was decided 15 years ago, a little bit more than 15 years ago, to have an outpost of the Louvre there in order to address the social dimension, the political dimension of a Louvre and of a national museum. When I say a national museum, and I always say Louvre is a national museum, it's not a Parisian museum. By decision of the revolution and the republic, it should share the collection with a nation on all over the French territory. So the Louvre Lens is really the modern answer to this, a way of reinventing at a smaller scale, but a very modern one, with direct connection between departments. The departments are no longer departments, they are talking to each other, which is a big revolution for the Louvre. And we are making progress in Paris about that. And it's an extraordinary success. 75% of the people, of the visitors of the Louvre Lens, come from la région des Hauts-de-France, the regional circle. People who will not go to Paris, probably never or very rarely go to Paris, and probably will never go to Louvre, because this is another planet for them. This is unreachable. And they have their own Louvre that is now part of this wonderful city. And we are extremely proud of this place. It's a beautiful modern building designed by Japanese architects called Sanaa, as Louvre Abu Dhabi has been designed by Jean Nouvel. They are, I think, immodestly one of the best museum design in the 21st century. They are
and I must say we were very proud because when you had the 200 years anniversary on the decipherment of hieroglyphs, our wonderful Amenhotep II was there as one of the key objects.
Yes.
Indeed, in this wonderful building a new conception.
A new conceptual building. And I think that it's the best of the Louvre reinventing itself for a new audience, for a new context, and it works. And it's a success. It's a really success. As Abu Dhabi, in another kind of also reach out, is a success. So I think those questions are, for me, very encouraging. Of course, I was part of a founding team of Louvre Abu Dhabi, so I know how it was done, and I all these questions are very much present now that I am president of the Louvre. And when I arrived at the Louvre 3 years ago, I said also to the teams, it's high time we brought back to Paris the lessons of Abu Dhabi and Lens, because they are just encouraging us to be bold, to reinvent ourselves, not to be afraid of having new ideas, try new connections between departments, for instance, new narratives, new way of displaying things. So those very innovative of the Louvre are, I think, very encouraging for the Louvre. You cannot do the same thing in Paris because the scale is different, the history, the place, the architecture is different. But again, the possibility of reinventing the idea itself, of the Louvre itself, in two other places, I think it's a very interesting lesson.
I do agree, and I have a question for you about Abu Dhabi. Since
Yes.
you work there, and it's a wonderful place. Those of you who have been there, the building of Jean Nouvel is just amazing, and what is they're creating there. I have the honor to teach museum studies to the students in Abu Dhabi, and actually in Saadiyat Island you are creating a museum island, because the Louvre was the first, but the Guggenheim is arriving, Tim La Bordelais, the Zayed Museum. I always discuss with my students when I'm there, we always read also the J'accuse that some other authors has done. Jean-Luc Amsel, very important cultural anthropologist in France, who has written a book about Louvre Abu Dhabi, and he has quoted also the work of a contemporary artist, Wali Rad, who was, and we actually had some works of Wali Rad here, because we had an exhibition called Statues Also Die, and Wali Rad was one of the artists showing these pictures that he makes of the statues that change shape because they don't understand what is their identity. Do you agree with this j'accuse on, Jean-Luc Amsel, if I make sum up, I mean, one should read the whole book, so pardon if I don't sum up it in a complete way, but just to make his point, he said, well, should we still build universal museums, and what does it mean when you build a universal museum now in the region? How is it in dialogue? I must say that I was there last May, and there was this wonderful exhibition of pictures, of family pictures from India and Bangladesh and Pakistan, and it was wonderful to see in the evening how the local workmen would be there, because it's like a community museum, because there was something talking to them. So do you agree on this criticism that Universal Museum should not expand in other region? Or?
First, no, we have to remind that the Louvre Abu Dhabi was a request from Abu Dhabi. It's not Paris, imposing an idea. It's really something that came from Abu Dhabi. And the first answer was rather, reluctant from the Louvre. One of my predecessor and good friend, Henri Loiret, was, well, Louvre in Abu Dhabi, does it make sense, And there was a lot of discussion while negotiating the idea of a Louvre in Abu Dhabi about reinventing this question of a universal museum for a new world, that is no longer centered in Paris, London, and New York, or Torino, but expanding with new actors. It's very important because it's one of the reasons I said yes to Henri when he asked me to leave the Musée d'Orsay to be in charge of his project. He said, Laurence, your generation of curators will not always be about having a show in New York and Paris and whatever, you know. There's a new world. There's a new Middle East, there's Asia, and the family of museum is expanding. And this will to be part of sort of a, say, family of big cultural, you know, institution is absolutely natural. And if these new actors ask our advice, our expertise to start, you know, their project, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on what we are, what are our mission. And I must say that I learned a lot, you know, because all the questions that we ask ourselves when we started in a dialogue with our friends from Abu Dhabi to imagine the cultural program of the Louvre Abu Dhabi, this idea of universal museum was really at the heart of it, as a shared value between Abu Dhabi and France, which is an amazing thing when you think about it. But of course, we asked new questions at that time. What about interpretation? How are we going to explain works coming from different cultural areas, different religions, all the tricky questions, you know. And all this question of interpretation, for instance, that were not at all present in the French Museum 15 years ago, are done now at the heart of our reflection in Paris, you know. So I think that we are starting to learn lessons from Abu Dhabi much more. I mean, it goes in that direction, it doesn't go in the other direction. And I think that this model of a universal museum is still very much relevant. We are in a globalized world. And we have to face it, objects are always traveled, you know, all the time. Since, you know, the dawn of time, objects have traveled. Artists, whatever, if we call them artists, you know, have worked in different places. And the idea of having works, you know, in different areas coming from a territory, but being present in different parts of the world, I think is an extraordinary sign of our common humanity and something, you know, a higher circle of values that we have in common. And I think it's very important. I was very proud when we were in charge, you know, advising the acquisition policy of Abu Dhabi. I was very proud, for instance, when the first African pieces were bought by Abu Dhabi. You know, this is no small gesture from a modern Arab country. Those were very, very powerful moments when Abu Dhabi bought a Yemenite Torah for the collection, for the religious gallery, where we suggested to put the 3 books, you know, in the same showcase. Only French people could, you know, have a sort of crazy idea saying, you know. And they said yes, because this is what this place is about. This
display, which I think is so powerful, and I also, I don't know what it was in the planning, but I also think he has influenced so much the Abrahamic family house, which is, you know, for those of you who do not know, next to the Louvre, there is this wonderful project, architectural project, when we decided to have a synagogue, a mosque, and a church of the same dimensions, on the same shape, and underneath it there is what we call forum of our common Abrahamic roots. And it's not a given that you are in the Middle East and you come down, the first thing you see is photos of Pope Francis, and you hear in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and then they talk about what is common in our cultures. And I think this is a way where a museum display and a very powerful display also influence the way, and if you think is also a new model.
It was, I think the Louvre Abu Dhabi gave confidence, I think, to our friends in Abu Dhabi about their vision, which is so I think so bold in a way and very precise at the same time. You just mentioned, I mean, in a couple of years, all the museums of Saudi Arabia will be completed and probably open to the public. So it's a very strong statement at the heart of the Middle East. And I think it also gave us confidence about, you know, the power of culture. In a very, very strategic place in today's world and tomorrow's world, and in a moment in history where we all feel that, you know, the world is extremely divided and going through extremely violent moments. And in a way, I think that museums are also, it's not their only mission, but they can also be places where people experience this kind of connection, openness. It's a safe place, you know, to be free. Free in your mind, free in your heart, be open to knowledge, to emotions. Museums are about emotions. They are about aesthetic emotions. They are discoveries, the idea that the eye, you know, opens, you know, the mind and the heart. And I think that it's why I do believe that this model, but of course we have to reinvent it all the time, of a universal museum is still, and I think maybe more than ever, relevant in today's world. And it's why I am confident about the Louvre, and it's why, you know, otherwise I would be crazy to be the director of the Louvre if I didn't believe in this, you know.
Yes, you know, you mentioned a couple of times, during COVID, at least in the Italian newspapers, there was a lot of discussion when we were all closed. We were closed for more than 9 months, about the sustainability of museums. And people were wondering whether not having people coming from overseas was a good idea or not to open a museum. Of course, we were fighting to reopen it. The president and I even wrote to major newspapers, say, please reopen the museum, because it's a place that we need at the moment. And then at the end, we've managed. I was shocked, though, reading what the newspaper was saying, that they were questioning whether a museum were necessary. I mean, nobody would question, and thanks God, nobody would question the role of university and schools. But there was this link immediately made between tourism and museums. So if we don't have tourists, we don't have, we cannot open it. And for us was wonderful, by the way, to reopen and to see how finally the people of Turin could come back.
Absolutely.
And people were not afraid of queuing and whatever. House, I already asked you that, but I will refine the question. How is the museum, the Louvre, which is probably tourist destination number 1, redefining, you said already with the school, its role in being a Parisian museum, belonging to the city and to the nation. It's also interesting what you said about national museums, because you know, in Italy we have 457 national museums, but it's because our history is different, so our pre-unified regions still keep their important museum, and they're called national. But how can a museum, in a very small part, also is something to do with us? Because when I ask a lot of friends, have you come to the museum? People living in Turin, they tell me, well, I came when I was in 4th grade, of course, to see the mummy. They said, well, the museum has changed. They should come back. And they said, no, but there are always queues in front of the museum, which is, by the way, is not true, because now you can book in advance. But the idea is, oh, this is a museum for foreigners, for tourists. And we are struggling. We are trying to increment. We managed. We went from 7% people from Turin visiting, which is nothing, up to almost 20% in a few years, but there is a lot to do. What are your strategies?
There's a lot. There are, you know, different answers to this. The numbers for the Louvre is 70% of our visitors are international visitors, 30% are French, which is not a very satisfactory number. By comparison, Orsay was doing better. When I was president, it was almost reached 40% of French people, because one of the key is to attract the visitors from Paris, so you have to work on the opening hours. I reintroduced 2 late openings on Wednesdays and Fridays, which are really very different when you come after 6 o'clock. It's a whole different Louvre, quieter, pleasant, and I think that Parisians enjoy that. And also you have to have a programming of exhibition and special events that will bring the attention also of the Parisian visitors that are very, as we call, blasé, as we say in French. You know, Paris is the city in the world where you have, at a moment, the most important numbers of exhibition, an extremely important exhibition. I must say that you have a cultural offer that even you would find no really comparison. I mean, even London and New York are not offering, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's a national thing, it's a national sport, I don't know. We love exhibition, we love create an event, it's a sort of a frenzy in Paris that it's very difficult to escape, and it's a lot of pressure for all the museum directors, because it's, when you go in the fall, for instance, in Paris, I mean, the cultural offer in terms of exhibition is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. But still, it's a way Paris works, and again, because I am a modernist, I come from the exhibition culture. I created a lot of shows. I love having exhibition. I think they are very important in the life of a museum. And I brought this culture back to the Louvre, which tended to forget a little bit this, and to bring the excitement, of exhibition. So we're trying new formats of exhibition, new thematics, and it works. I mean, we see this fall, we have at least 4 exhibitions open at the same time, and other kinds of displays also within the galleries of the department. For instance, the Torna collection is inside the Appartement d'été d'Autriche, but we have also a large exhibition about the figure of a fool in the Middle Ages and Renaissance time. We have a small show about a masterpiece by Watteau at the same time, and it works. I am somebody who thinks that museums should be polyphonic. It was the way Orsay was conceived by Mr. Laclotte, and the way the Grand Louvre was conceived also by the same man, Michel Laclotte, one of my illustrious predecessors. In both places, he had an auditorium, a large auditorium for music, of course, lectures, all the cinema, but also performing arts. We had, for instance, a commission with the Festival d'Automne about a creation of a contemporary choreographer inspired by the exhibition Figure of a Fool, and we just had the premiere this week. An extraordinary thing with dancers in the medieval Louvre, within the older part of the Louvre, a very contemporary approach, and it works. It works. And again, you see a new type of visitor that tended to not to come to the Louvre because it was exactly the same problem as you. It is a touristic thing, I've been there when I was a kid with my school, nothing ever happens, and no. So we're trying to bring the city back, to reconnect the Louvre to Paris. And it's one of the key questions behind the master plan we are working on right now, and this second entrance that will be much more connected to the city, on the eastern part of the city, directly to the city of Paris, in order to reconnect this extraordinary institution to the heart of Paris, and to be part of the cultural life of Paris, not to be this isolated, beautiful, but isolated place, which tended to forget where it was. And it is at the heart of a very beautiful city, and with a very active and cultural life.
I see that our time has flown by, but I still have 2 questions. One easy one, and the second one a more difficult one. The first question: a lot of colleagues worldwide are studying what is the role of new technologies, of the digital revolution, well, even the transition, because the revolution has already been there, we're in, and museums. There are some institutions that are afraid of sharing digital, and I always, when I arrived in the museum, I really opened up the sharing of digital, and I also always quote, for people who are afraid, that in 1838, when one of the most important technological discoveries was announced in France, François Arago announced the birth of daguerreotypie, which influenced, of course, and paintings and old words. But then he said, give one of two of these photo camera to l'Institut d'Egypte to document thousands of hieroglyphs. And so Maxime Ducamp and Gustave Flaubert were the two first appointed by the Ministry of Public Education in France to go and document the monuments. People were afraid, oh well, now the photographs will come and people will not go to Egypt. The contrary happened. Thomas Cook was born, and we could say mass tourism was born. So photography actually was very good to spread the knowledge of cultural heritage. What do you think that digital means could mean for museums today? And do you think that museum should start thinking? I remember that when he was re-elected, President Macron said that having physical museum, but having also digital museum with special programs was something that Europe should think about as one of the main pillars for the future.
No, it's a world of opportunities that we do not see. I mean, we started to see the tip of the iceberg, I think. No, I think we should be open to it. We should embrace it. But of course, you know, museums, especially large institutions like the Louvre, can be very slow, you know, to put into motion and to follow also the technological evolution. Because when you make a technological choice, the minute you make it, it's already obsolete, because you will open the gallery 3 years later with the technology you've chosen, and it's, in a way, it's already dated. So it's always a big question in terms of also spending public money for this kind of investment. You have to make the right choices. But definitely the spirit is to open, and I think that really, especially with AI now, and we definitely see new possibilities. In terms of, for instance, putting our collections into context. When you think of ancient worlds, we have fragments in our collections are fragments, basically. And it's very difficult, and you do a wonderful job in your galleries to give a lot of context, you know, to the objects. But I think that in years to come, we're going to see extraordinary possibilities of putting the objects, you know, in a really the world of context and of discoveries nourished by the research and the job of the excavations, for instance, that are still going on, for instance, in Egypt. I still think that also there's another idea is the languages. You know, a place like the Louvre, I don't know, I can't remember the number of languages, but somebody counted it. I mean, it's infinite, because we have, you know, coming from, I mean, really the birth of writing to nowadays, and the translation. The capacity of understanding, having access to a translation directly with your, you know, mobile phone is now possible. It's going to be possible. Everybody can, this kind of knowledge was only, you know, the possibility of few scholars with very old languages, forgotten languages, you know, difficult to understand. It's now going to be possible. And it will open a new reading of our collection, new worlds of understanding, because it's not about our job will no longer be about translating, but giving context to the translation and so it's different layers, you know, of possibilities. So there's no perfect answer. I think every museum is struggling with this. make a few choices, and I will have, as president of the Louvre, regarding our master plan, to make probably a few strategic choices in terms of digital projects, because we cannot run 50 projects at the same time. It's impossible. But we are in contact with the tech world, and there are really very, very interesting promises, including the understanding of a building, the history of a building, and the collection within the building, because this is also a key question for the Louvre, because people are lost in the Louvre. It's beautiful to get lost, it's like Venice, you have to get lost, it's where it becomes beautiful, but still people are getting lost in the Louvre, and we need to help them, and digital would be a solution.
Yeah, and I think that also from your answer, it comes out that the only answer that museums have still is what we were born with, which is research. If you think when the museum was born, and we still have that wonderful Greek word to define our institution, when we were born in Athens, we don't even know whether they were objects, but they were scholars coming together and asking questions about the ontology, about life, and defining new form of dialogue. So research, and probably, as you said, our way of doing research will change. Probably the curators of the future will be also different curators, multidisciplinary, dealing with philosophy, new technology, anthropology, to understand what we're doing. I cannot resist to ask the president of the Louvre, we said, well, one of the most, if not the most important museum in the world. So what is your vision of the future? Do museums, and this is a rhetorical question, have a future? Because sometimes we are seen as old, dusty institutions. As I said before, during COVID, people were some Cassandra saying that we had no future. And then 2023, worldwide, was the year where the museum were most visited ever. Yeah. Do we have a future? What kind of future?
We have a bright future, dear Christian. Don't be afraid. I'm sure of that. No, I think we need places like museum for all the reasons I already mentioned. In this very fractured world where people want to find answers, we cannot give them answers, but we can give them probably new questions, because we are about history, we're about nuances, complexities of the world, and we give depth to the present, because the stories, the narratives of the Louvre come from a very, very long time. And in a way, they put into perspective our present day. And I think that somehow, maybe secretly, it's what people are looking for in museum, a sort of special place where they can reflect about themselves, because you always look at the object with your own sensitivity. You visit a museum with what you are. And at the same time, you're confronted with something, in our cases, that come from very far away in time and in space. And I think that it's what people are looking for, this experience of time, this experience of, finding your place in the world and somehow being connected to this, because you can be moved by a fragment of a relief of coming from Egypt, and it's a very contemporary feeling. And I think it's in a way, I don't know if it's reassuring, I don't know, it works differently for different people, but it's definitely, there's something in the experience of a museum that is probably good, because otherwise people would be crazy to come back to places like museums. So there's probably something positive about them, in the end.
So, well, thank you so much. I would like to thank Laurence.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, and thank you also for this message of hope. We hosted among the lectures in the past few months, Orhan Pamuk came here, and he gave a wonderful definition of museums. He has not written it down, so that's why I'm telling you. He said, for him, museum is a place where time is transformed into space.
Yes,
because it is
it's one of the most, I know the definition, it's one of the most beautiful definitions.
Isn't it?
I love this definition, it's
yes.
Absolutely perfect.
And I think that is also the key. We are all struggling with memory, with time, with our role in society. So that's why we need a museum. It's the place where we come to terms. Laurence has agreed to answer questions, so if there are questions, please feel free to ask. Potete ovviamente fare domande in italiano e poi le tradurrò io in inglese. Ci sono domande? Sì.
Salve, una semplice curiosità. I rapporti con i musei italiani attualmente, scambi, mostre?
A curiosity, what are the ongoing relations with Italian museums, exchange and exhibitions?
There are, permanent relationship between the Louvre and Italian museums with the different departments. We, of course, exchange loans all the time for our respective exhibitions and also sometimes share projects. So no, it's a very active relationship, I must say. You know that the heart of the Louvre is almost Italian. So it's a sort of binational treasure, I would say, in a way.
And I would like to say, if you have the chance to be in Paris, Laurence was already commenting on it, there is a wonderful exhibition on Torna, which was also co-curated with a very good friend of the Louvre and the Museo Egizio, Salvatore Setti.
Yes.
So if you have the chance to be there, it's really wonderful.
Wonderful, yes. Wonderful adventure.
Some other questions?
Buongiorno Presidente. Io sono stata molto colpita dal progetto Louvre Abu Dhabi. Non sapevo cosa fosse, quindi l'ho appreso oggi, però mi piaceva pensare se anche lei ritiene che i musei attuali possano essere il veicolo di una cultura laica, in senso che supera le divisioni, l'intolleranza, che sia multietnica, eccetera, che è una cultura che non lo fa da padrone in questo periodo, in quest'epoca, in questo mondo.
So she said she was struck by your presentation of the Louvre Abu Dhabi, a project that she didn't know about, and that triggered a question whether you think that museum can be put forward a new model of society which is not divided by religion, that is not divided by identity, but is more multicultural.
It's probably a lot for a museum to do, so I would be cautious about that. But it's true, sorry, I take the French model. As you know, we are a republic, as you are, and with laicity at the heart of it. And it's highly debated in France. I won't enter this question. But when we create, for instance, the Department for Islamic Art was created almost 20 years ago, it was a political decision made by President Chirac after 9/11. As Louvre Abu Dhabi was a project post 9/11, started from Abu Dhabi, in order to be in dialogue with the Western world, and to have a moment of peace around culture. And when President Chirac asked the Louvre to create this Department for Islamic Art, it was also a symbol of recognition of a civilization, of course a religion too, but of a civilization. Our job is not to present, for instance, the Islamic world through only the eye of religion. It's a whole civilization that is presented. That's very important. For instance, now we are working on the Byzantium project and Eastern Christianities. It's the same kind of model that we are thinking about. And it's where, and you're very right about that, we can find a place where we do not, where we create a place of freedom, I would say, of approach. You are a believer, you are not a believer, you belong to a certain faith, you do not. That's not a problem. You're visiting a museum, we give you information, we give you tools to understand the objects, the origin, the practice, whatever. But we create a space. Museums are, for me, a place of freedom, let's say, of intellectual freedom. And that's, for me, it's why they are so important. There are not so many places in society where you can go, enjoy a work coming from different religion, different civilization, some active, some very forgotten, and have the same, kind of curiosity and the same tolerance. You may dislike a work of art. It's okay. Museums are made also for that, expressing your dislike or your interest. It's perfectly all right. It's about what we call critical mind also, and for me it's very important. But I know that some people would say that it's not the right approach, and it's perfectly debatable. By the way, museums are places for debates and discussions also. I love inviting people who are not in our auditorium, who might not, agree with everything that the Louvre does, who might have another point of view. It's okay to discuss. We need to welcome the discussion and the debate. What I do not want is violence and, non-respect of the curatorial work, of research, of intellectual work. But I do like the debate. And for instance, we are welcoming in a few days a wonderful intellectual, Souleymane Bachir Diagne, who is going to give 5 lessons, La Chaire du Louvre, every year. And he will tackle the question of the universality of the Louvre. Le Louvre, quels universels, with a question mark. And he comes from Africa. And it's a very interesting point of view because he will tackle this question of universality with his own. He's a professor of philosophy in Columbia University in New York. Also, he's a great intellectual of our days, and he's going probably to criticize the Louvre on many aspects, but he's going to make us think about also the strength of the Louvre and the potential of the Louvre. It's okay, perfectly okay.
Well, thank you for your answer. Very inspiring. Yes. Oh, you have okay.
Buonasera, vorrei chiedere, sui bilanci del museo, quanto pesano i finanziamenti pubblici, quelli privati e la vendita dei biglietti?
Okay.
Serious question.
Well, it's very important. You understood it
The
already.
painful question.
Qualcuno va pur farla.
Okay. Well, we are state-owned. This is France at its best, national, centralized. So the Louvre is really the expression of that. But of course, we are state-owned. The collections are state-owned. A lot of our staff, by the way, the staff of the Louvre is 2,200 people working every day in the Louvre. So it's quite a large institution.
Yes, just to give you a comparison, when the president and I arrived, we met a staff of 13 people, and then, thanks God, now we are 90, which for us is a huge step in 10 years, but of course,
congratulations.
2,500.
But a lot of those people are civil servants. For instance, the curators, they are civil servants. Most of them are civil servants, for instance. So we come from this model where the state was really at the heart of a cultural policy. with really a vision of, a very beautiful vision of sharing the culture and giving access to everyone in society to culture. Of course, those wonderful ideas are a little bit under pressure right now because, of course, of a financial situation, especially of France nowadays, but it's a common situation in all of Europe, and a lot of public institutions are facing, the fact that our states do not have the same means that they used to have, and so we are in a sort now of I would say, hybrid model. Still very much finance. I mean, the state is giving the Louvre 100 million euros, every year to, especially for the staff. But it's not enough. It's not enough. No, it's not enough. It's not enough. So the Louvre has its own resources, which come from the ticketing revenue, which is the most important source of revenue. Other revenues by fundraising. We are actively fundraising, and I really relaunched this policy, and we are very successful. For instance, the new department I was talking about Byzantium and the Eastern Christianities, will be completely funded by the Louvre for fundraising and our own resources. As the Islamic Art Department was, for new projects, we are looking for money. We are really looking for money and being rather autonomous in our funding. Where we need the help of the state is, of course, in the functioning of the maintenance of a building and the everyday functioning, I would say, of a museum. And of course, it's a struggle nowadays. It's a struggle because the state and the Minister of Culture is making very difficult choices. We have to make very difficult choices all the time. But we need to balance, those different sources of money. You have also, for instance, another source of money for the Louvre, very special one, is the trademark license agreement with Louvre Abu Dhabi. Louvre Abu Dhabi is an extremely interesting model because it is a diplomatic agreement between the two countries with giving resources to the Louvre and to French museums for a number of years. And the Louvre has a special agreement only for the Louvre for the use of the name of the Louvre, which give us means to project ourselves into projects, and also, for instance, we have created an endowment fund based on the American, model, the endowment funds. But of course, we are poorer, much poorer than the Met and MoMA. So we are small players in this game, but we are imagining the future of the Louvre and in this complexity of the different resources that we need now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you for sharing with us, because just to clarify to you, our museum is a foundation. It was created thanks to a law implemented in 2001, when the Ministry of Culture, for the first time in Italy, decided to give a state-owned collection to be run by a private-run foundation, where the ministry, of course, is present. So we have the ministry, the local municipality, the region, and two bank foundations in there. They managed to find the first 50 million which we needed for the renovation of the building. But from that moment onwards, we survive mainly from ticketing and fundraising, touring exhibitions, bookshops, etc. But if you think that this is all the resources, I mean, we have to create all the resources for everything, for conservation, for paying the salaries of the staff, for our functioning. It's very difficult. It requires a very kind of flexible mindset, because on one hand, Professor Settis, even Professor Montanari was said at a certain point, we cannot work like a restaurant. I mean, if you have to do conservation, you need to. It's not that if nobody comes. And then during COVID, it came out how difficult the system is, because when the entrance collapse, if you don't have the state supporting you, is a problem. So
in France, the state protected the museum. I must really, we must realize that. We have been closed for quite a long time in 2 moments. It was a very tough time for French Museum, but the state protected those large institutions. Nobody was fired, everybody kept the job, and they were protected. But of course, the post-COVID, for instance, the international situation, the tension that we live in our world, is a reality. And yeah, we need to have a very flexible approach to it without losing our souls, of course, and without giving up, making compromise of what is really the heart of our mission. We are not here to make money. That's not the idea. The idea is to balance what it costs. And to open the Louvre every day is cost almost 600,000 euros just to open the place without doing anything. So that's the reality of the Louvre. So obviously you need a bit of money.
Thank you. So I don't complain anymore because during COVID we were calculating how much it costed to open, but for us it's 28,000 euros, which is a lot of money.
But it costs.
Well, compared to your numbers, now I feel reassured.
It's a relative comparison, but it's true. And so.
Is there, if there is still one question? Yes. I can give you a mic.
Allora, volevo chiederle, visto che appunto siamo in un periodo storico in cui anche grazie all'evoluzione tecnologica o anche solo appunto per motivi politici o comunque anche culturali sta cambiando in modo molto frequente e anche generazioni nuove stanno cambiando proprio metodo di lettura e metodo di livello critico appunto, come può il Louvre mantenersi comunque un luogo in cui connettere varie generazioni o anche solo varie fasi temporali senza snaturarsi?
So, since society is changing so quickly in many different ways, how can the Louvre develop strategies to connect to new generations without selling its soul, as you said, without forgetting the core business?
You have to listen to the visitors. I mean, visitor surveys are really part, and it's also a new culture in the Louvre that I really insisted on doing a lot. Because we have to listen to the visitors, to their needs, to what works, what doesn't work. And, we cannot just be satisfied saying, oh, we have the largest museum in the world. Yeah, but if we are doing a terrible job, that's not help, And so you have to listen, and you have to listen to younger generation. You have also to be able to address to younger generation social media, for instance, and the communication strategy also has been completely revived. We are not perfect, but I think we are in a better place right now. And we know that we are able also to reach to a younger audience. We also need to be more open to invite voices, other voices than ourselves. That's a big question for museum today, is not only the curator's voice, the curator's interpretation. It's about giving the possibilities, open the museum to other voices, including younger generation of visitors, of artists, of, just personalities of today's world that can be interested and by the Louvre and give just the desire to come to the Louvre. So the notion of ambassadors of the Louvre also, coming from younger generation, is extremely important. And also in our programming also, it's very important. I was mentioning, for instance, this dance project that we had. We're going to have the first exhibition in the Louvre in January about fashion. It will be called Louvre Couture. It's not because we want to do a fashion show. It's because there's a real history about haute couture and Louvre. Starting with Christian Greco, who was a great fan of ancient Egypt. He was mad about ancient Egypt, and he went to the Louvre to study and was really inspired. And all the way to Alexander McQueen and to the living creators of today, they all had pieces of the Louvre in their minds, And this, I think this exhibition, which will be very beautiful and open within the department of the decorative art, department of the Louvre, will probably bring new audiences, new visitors, because young people are very much attracted by this question of fashion. This is so much part of Italian and French culture. You know, this is something that is really a drive. And I think this is one of the small initiatives that will break down barriers between a younger generation and the Louvre and say, oh, but the Louvre is for everyone. And by the way, yes, Karl Lagerfeld was mad about 18th century furniture, and he made this crazy dress, and you're going to see the crazy dress by the commode that inspired it. And you're going to enter the mind of Karl Lagerfeld looking at 18th century. And it's a way of discovering Louvre. It will be a way to push the door of the Louvre and say, oh, that's pretty interesting, you know. Or that's more exciting than I thought, maybe.
Well, thank you again, Laurence, for being with us. It's been amazing being in dialogue with you.
No,
and
thank you for the
it was
invitation.
full of inspiration and ideas, and it's nice to see how we share, even with different measures, of course, but common challenges. And thank you also for your words, very positive one. We have a bright future ahead of us, and so
Definitely.
we keep working for improving the way that our visitors can experience the collection. And we keep working, and I say all the time, trying to say the museum is the house for everybody. Everybody
Absolutely.
is welcome, and
Absolutely.
we have a lot to do that, and it's good that we exchange ideas. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for your invitation. Thank you.